Professor Ali Khan Mehmudabad of Ashoka University has been granted interim bail by the Supreme Court. The professor has been behind bars for the last 3 days. He was arrested by the Haryana police on Sunday for his Facebook post on Colonel Sophia Qureshi and India's Operation Sindoor. 2 FIRs were filed against him for allegedly making objectionable remarks and demeaning India's armed forces. One of the FIRs was filed by a BJP youth wing worker in Haryana, and the other was filed by the chief of Haryana State Commission for Women. Professor Mehmudabad was charged under sections of promoting enmity between groups and acts seen as threatening national integrity and sovereignty. Senior advocate Kapil Sibbal represented Professor Mehmudabad in the top court today. The matter was heard by a 2-judge bench of Justices Suryakant and N. Koteswar Singh. While the judges didn't grant an interim bail to Professor Mehmudabad, they also pulled up the professor for his language and the words he used in his Facebook post. Hello and welcome, I'm Shubham Chauhan. Let's get started. So there are 3 things that the Supreme Court ordered in this case today. First and foremost is the interim bail itself. The judges said that the interim bail is subject to furnishing of bail bonds to the satisfaction of the Chief Judicial Magistrate of Sonepat in Haryana. There shall be only one set of bail bonds for both the FIRs is what the judges said. These bail bonds are basically a financial or personal guarantee provided to a court by an accused person, like a promise that the accused will comply with the conditions of their bail and appear whenever required. That is part of the usual procedure. In addition to this, the Supreme Court laid down some more rules that Professor Mehmudabad has to follow, like he has to surrender his passport. He cannot speak or write about the subject matter of the case. The Supreme Court also barred him from making any sort of comments on the 22nd April Pahalgam attack and India's Operation Sindoor. So that was about the interim bail and conditions. The second part is that the Supreme Court has refused to quash the FIRs or the case altogether against Professor Mehmudabad. The Supreme Court said today that there was no case made for that. So an interim bail has been given, but the matter hasn't been quashed, and a probe into that will go on. A special investigation team or SIT has been ordered to probe the professor's comments in detail. The court directed DGP of Haryana to constitute an SIT within 24 hours, comprising of 3 IPS officers who do not belong to Haryana or Delhi. This SIT shall be headed by an Inspector General of Police, and one of the members of this SIT shall be a woman. The next aspect is that of the language and words that Professor Mehmudabad used in his Facebook posts. Now, just to give you a quick recap, there were 2 posts that Professor Mehmudabad put out on Facebook on the 8th and 11th of May. In the first post, he questioned the applause from right-wing supporters for Colonel Sophia Qureshi and said that the same people should also advocate for victims of mob lynching and the arbitrary demolition of homes. Else, Professor Mehmudabad said that this was just hypocrisy. He also made other points in the post like lauding India's Operation Sindoor against Pakistan, and also made the point as to why war should be avoided. In the other post, he elaborated more on that. He spoke at length about how and why war isn't and must not be a solution. He pointed out that those sitting far away think that war is like a video game, and hence it's easy to call for one. But in reality, things are different. Now to us, nowhere in either of the posts does it look like he's demeaning either the armed forces, women, or even threatening India's sovereignty at large. Yes, one may disagree with parts of what Professor Mehmudabad said, but not to the point where this would amount to sedition. Senior advocate Kapil Sibbal made the same point in Supreme Court today, that where is the criminal action in this? The Supreme Court said that everyone has the freedom of speech and expression, but the timing of such posts also matter, and such occasions should not be used to garner publicity, cheap publicity. Bar and bench quoted Justice Suryakant saying, yes, everyone has the right to free speech and expression, but is it the time to talk about all of this? Country is already going through all this. Country is faced with all this. Monsters came and attacked our people. We have to be united. Why to get cheap popularity on these occasions? You should know what is happening. There is right to free speech, etc. But where is the duty? As if whole country for last 75 years is only distributing rights and no duty. With your academic standards, Mr. Sibbal, this is what is called dog whistling. Effectively, the Supreme Court pulled up Professor Mehmudabad, saying he could have been more careful with his choice of words given the tensions between India and Pakistan. In Justice Suryakant's words, the professor must have used a neutral language, one that doesn't hurt any sentiments. That's because some words of his in the current post can have dual meanings. To these observations, Kapil Sibbal reiterated that no communal tensions were created by the Facebook posts of Professor Mehmudabad. Sibbal also pointed to the fact that Professor Mehmudabad's wife is 9 months pregnant and the husband and her husband is in judicial custody. The court then went on to quiz the government lawyer, the Haryana government lawyer, on what exact part of Professor's post was problematic or outraged the modesty of women, as were the charges in the FIR. Additional Solicitor General of India, S.V. Raju, looking at his papers, responded, "Let me see the plea." He made some comments on Sophia Qureshi. Second statement is worse than the first one, my friend, that is Kapil Sibal has not read it completely. Basically, the government lawyer couldn't point out which exact part of the statement was problematic, anti-women, demeaning Indian forces, endangering sovereignty, etc. And that's really the question, an answer to which almost everyone is searching, but haven't gotten one yet, that where is the part that is offensive or demeaning. In fact, towards the end of the hearing, the Supreme Court also had a warning, ostensibly for students and professors at Ashoka University. Here's what Live Law and Bar and Bench quoted the apex court saying: "It is not acceptable to us that some so-called private university opens and then starts making any sort of statements. Today only we read in paper, the students and professors, if they dare to do anything, we will not accept this. If they try to join hands, etc., we know how to deal with these people. They are within our jurisdiction." Remember, several students, academicians, scholars, and activists have stood in solidarity with Professor Mehmudabad given whatever has happened. In fact, the Times of India reported that his colleagues were keeping a vigil at the police station in shifts. They decided to ensure that Professor Mehmudabad isn't left alone during his incarceration. Not that the Supreme Court is exactly talking about these instances, but it made a larger point as well. Meanwhile, Ashoka University welcomed this interim relief. Their statement read, "We are relieved and heartened by Professor Ali Khan Mehmudabad being granted interim bail by the Honorable Supreme Court. It has provided great comfort to his family and all of us at Ashoka University." Now, Ashoka University has also come under fire for not coming to the rescue of their own faculties, including Mehmudabad, whenever they've got into trouble. Like we showed you in our previous video on this subject, something that you can watch on our channel, the university has also distanced itself and in some cases asked so-called problematic faculties to resign, or the faculties have eventually resigned over controversies, and also the university so taking a step back and distancing themselves from whatever has happened. But if you look at the Supreme Court hearing today, it looks like a mixed bag on the face of it. Of course, the biggest relief is that Professor Ali Khan Mehmudabad has been granted interim bail. But the court's observations and what this means for freedom of speech going forward has already sparked a lot of debate, particularly whether an SIT investigation is needed to probe deeper into a Facebook post that looks pretty clear in what it means. And that by no means seems seditious, at least to us. What the court actually meant by the dual meanings of some of his words is something that is hard to understand at the moment. But as we speak about Professor Mehmudabad and the controversy over his comments, there is one more case that ought to be spoken about, which is on similar lines. Vijay Shah, the BJP minister in the Madhya Pradesh government, in a speech he effectively called Colonel Sophia Qureshi a sister from the same community as the terrorists. This was captured on video. In fact, we had done a report on that Vijay Shah episode as well, which you can check out. But contrary to Professor Mehmudabad, it was Vijay Shah's comments that were out there, spelt in as many words and perhaps demeaning, not perhaps, rather demeaning India's armed forces. In his case, the Madhya Pradesh High Court called for an FIR, then pulled up the authorities for doing a shoddy work on that, besides of course slamming the minister for his comments. In his case too, an SIT has been formed. The only difference was that Vijay Shah was never arrested, unlike the alacrity that Haryana police showed in Professor Mehmudabad's case, where they landed up at his residence in Delhi hours after an FIR, 15 police personnel to arrest one professor at 6:30 in the morning. Shah did not face any of that. When he went to the Supreme Court, he was granted protection from arrest even as the probe continues. As for Professor Mehmudabad, who was sent to 14-day judicial custody yesterday, and his family, the interim bail is a huge relief, and also the beginning of what looks like a long legal fight for him. That's all we have for this report. Thanks for watching.